We can build AI that writes poetry and land probes on comets, but we still have no idea how one man can sit in a tub of ice and not freeze to death. Today, we're diving into 10 real human abilities that make science deeply uncomfortable. These aren't comic book superpowers or internet rumors. These are people documented by universities, scanned in brain machines, poked by doctors, filmed by TV crews, and still labeled with the most terrifying word in science, unexplained. Let's start with the lightning genius. In the early 2000s, an ordinary maintenance worker, let's call him Clemens, was struck by lightning while crossing a parking lot in Denver. Before the strike, he wasn't a math guy. Numbers were just squiggles that never quite behaved. He struggled with basic arithmetic and had zero advanced training. Then the lightning hit, his heart stopped. His brain was flooded with millions of volts. And when he woke up days later, his mind was not the same. Suddenly, Clemens could do things that left professional mathematicians blinking in confusion. He could multiply huge numbers in his head, rattle off square roots to a ridiculous number of decimal places, and juggle equations he'd never formally learned. To him, it didn't feel like calculating. It felt like seeing. Prime numbers had colors. Perfect squares appeared as spirals. Equations weren't lines of symbols. They were floating three-dimensional shapes he could rotate in his mind like holograms. Neurologists call this kind of blending of senses synesthesia, and there are real cases where numbers have colors or shapes in people's minds. There are also documented cases of acquired Savant syndrome, where a blow to the head or a brain injury suddenly unlocks shocking abilities in art, music, or math. One man became obsessed with drawing perfect geometric patterns after a concussion. Another, Jason Paget, started seeing the world in fractals and developed an intuitive grasp of complex math after a brutal mugging. It's as if the brain sometimes rewires itself in a glitchy way and accidentally hits a turbo mode button in one tiny area. When scientists scanned Clemens's brain in our story, they noticed new pathways connecting regions that don't normally talk so much, areas for visual processing, pattern recognition, and numerical reasoning. Instead of slowly crunching numbers step by step like most of us, his brain seemed to see the answer all at once, like recognizing a friend's face in a crowd. It's closer to pattern recognition than textbook math. Here's where things get uncomfortable for neuroscience. The speed and complexity of his answers don't fit nicely with how we think neurons process information. It's not that the laws of physics are being broken, it's that our current models might be way too simplistic. The brain doesn't always work like a calculator. It works like a massively parallel pattern machine. When that machine gets rewired in just the right weird way, strange things can happen. And Clemens himself, he described math as a conversation. He didn't work out the answer. He said he just asked the numbers what they wanted to be. And they told him. Whether or not you buy his poetic explanation, his case and others like it hint at something profound. Maybe every brain has hidden circuits capable of this kind of extreme pattern insight, but they stay locked behind the brain's usual settings. Electrical trauma, like lightning, may sometimes scramble those settings in a way that makes one skill explode while everything else stays more or less normal. And if you think that's strange, wait until you meet the man who can ride a bicycle through traffic using nothing but clicks and echoes. You'd think humans would have mastered all 5 senses by now. But then there's Daniel, the man who sees without seeing. Daniel Kish was born completely blind, but he moves through the world with a confidence most sighted people don't have. He hikes, he travels alone. He rides a bicycle through city streets. And the wild part, he does it using a skill straight out of a superhero origin story, human echolocation. Echolocation is what bats and dolphins use, sending out clicks, then reading the returning echoes to build a mental map of their surroundings. Scientists assumed humans had no real talent for this, at least not at a functional level. But Daniel didn't get the memo. From childhood, he started making sharp tongue clicks everywhere he went, and his brain did something extraordinary with the sound. When neuroscientists at Western University scanned his brain, they saw something that should be impossible. His visual cortex, the part of your brain that normally processes sight, lit up as if he were actually seeing the world. A blind man's brain had repurposed itself, wiring sound into sight. It's like the brain said, if the eyes won't do their job, I'll teach the ears to. This isn't just adaptation, it's transformation. Daniel can detect objects as small as a pencil from several meters away. He can distinguish materials, metal, plastic, wood, by the quality of their echoes. He can walk through unfamiliar buildings without touching a single wall. And in highly controlled labs, he's matched the navigation accuracy of sighted people doing the same tasks. In one experiment, he identified facial expressions, smiling, frowning, surprised, with just the echoes bouncing off a person's moving face. Think about that. He can hear your smile. And here's where the science gets even more compelling. Daniel teaches this ability to others. Hundreds of blind students who train with him develop a form of echolocation so sharp that MRI scans show their brains rewiring too. Visual cortex activation, enhanced spatial mapping, the same neural fingerprints seen in Daniel himself. This suggests something huge. This ability isn't a rare mutation or a lucky accident. It's a built-in feature of the human brain dormant in most of us because sight steals the spotlight. When vision is lost, the brain doesn't give up. It upgrades. Modern research from MIT and Nature Neuroscience backs this up. The brain is far more flexible than we ever thought. It can reassign entire sensory departments like a manager reassigning roles in a company. Deaf individuals often process vibration in their auditory cortex. Blind individuals process sound in their visual cortex. The brain hates idle real estate, so it renovates. And beyond the science, there's something beautifully human about Daniel's story. He doesn't see blindness as a limitation. He calls echolocation freedom. When people ask how he copes, he laughs. He's not coping, he's navigating the world with a sixth sense level upgrade that most of us technically have, but rarely unlock. And if the idea of a man seeing through echoes seems unbelievable, just wait until you meet someone whose problem isn't the lack of memory, but having too much of it. You'd think forgetting things would be the annoying part of being human, until you meet someone who can't forget anything at all. Meet Jill Price, the woman with a memory so powerful, so relentless, that scientists at UC Irvine once described it as a biological recording device. Her condition is called Highly Superior Autobiographical Memory, or HSAM. Sounds like a gift, right? Except Jill calls it a burden. Jill remembers every day of her life since childhood with eerie, almost supernatural clarity. Ask her what she wore on March 3rd, 92. She'll tell you. Ask her what she ate for breakfast on a random Sunday in 1988. She'll tell you. Ask her what she felt, who she talked to, what she watched on TV, whether it was raining. She'll recount it instantly, as if she's reliving a scene from yesterday. When she first contacted researchers, she didn't say, "I'm gifted." She said, "Please help me. I can't shut it off." That's the dark side of HSAM. It's not selective. Every argument, every heartbreak, every embarrassing moment, every painful memory, all of it is permanently accessible, always vivid, always fresh. For Jill, the past isn't behind her. It's right there with her all the time. When neuroscientists studied her brain, they found enlarged and unusually active regions in the temporal lobe and hippocampus areas deeply involved in memory storage. But here's the twist. The amount of data she retains should exceed what we think the brain can hold. According to basic neural models, memory is messy and lossy. The brain overwrites, compresses, discards. Jill's brain apparently didn't get that memo. And she's not alone. Fewer than 100 confirmed HSAM cases exist worldwide, but every one of them shows similar brain anomalies. People with HSAM can recall personal experiences with near-perfect accuracy, yet score completely normal on tests for academic memory. They can't necessarily remember historical dates or phone numbers or random facts any better than you can. Their genius is tightly focused on their life. It's like having a hard drive that records everything about your personal world, but nothing else gets special treatment. Researchers from UC Irvine and Emory University discovered something else surprising. HSAM isn't about having a perfect memory. It's about having a perfect autobiographical system. These individuals automatically categorize and store each day as if it's crucial. Imagine journaling your entire life without ever picking up a pen and never losing a page. So what does this reveal about the rest of us? Some scientists believe HSAM is the extreme version of a system we all have but rarely use. Think about emotional memory. The smell of a certain perfume, a childhood song, the way your grandparents' house looked. These trace-like memories hint that your brain can store vivid details. It just doesn't do it consistently. HSAM may be showing us what happens when the brain's importance filter malfunctions and marks everything as unforgettable. And if a limitless memory sounds wild, our next story flips the script in a different direction. It's not about remembering everything. It's about lifting something no human should be able to lift. You'd think muscles follow the rules of biology. You know, strength limits, tendon safety physics. Until you hear about the day a mother lifted a car. It happened in 20th. A Chevrolet Impala slipped off its jack and came crashing down on a teenage boy. His mother, Angela Cavallo, did something textbooks say should be impossible. She lifted nearly 2 tons of metal high enough for bystanders to pull her son out. No training, no warning, no second chance. She just lifted it. This phenomenon has a name: hysterical strength. It's the kind of strength that bursts out in life or death moments and then vanishes as quickly as it came. And it's one of the most unsettling mysteries in human physiology, because scientists still can't fully explain how the human body can suddenly break its own limits so dramatically. Under normal conditions, your brain restricts how many muscle fibers you can activate. The usual cap is around 60. This isn't laziness. It's a safety mechanism meant to protect your bones and tendons from tearing themselves apart. Your brain treats your muscles like a powerful engine with a governor installed. It stops you from redlining, but in moments of extreme danger, something in that safety system shuts off. When researchers like Dr. Vladimir Zatsiorsky at Penn State studied strength bursts, they saw muscle activation numbers spike to theoretical maximums 100 fiber recruitment. That shouldn't happen outside of elite powerlifting under controlled conditions. Yet ordinary people have done it in chaotic emergencies. And it's not just car lifting stories. In 1982, a man named Tony Cavallo, no relation to Angela, lifted the rear of a Cadillac to rescue a trapped cyclist. In 2009, a 110-pound woman fought off a polar bear that attacked a group of children. A polar bear, basically a furry refrigerator with claws. The question is, how? Part of the explanation might be adrenaline. Massive surges of it can temporarily override pain-boost heart rate and ramp up glucose availability. But the amounts recorded in hysterical strength cases would normally be toxic. Your body is basically turning itself into a biochemical blowtorch for just a few seconds. Recent research from the University of Victoria suggests something even stranger during these episodes. People show temporary changes in brain connectivity. Areas involved in motor control, usually gated by unconscious safety circuits, suddenly open wide. It's as if the brain pulls the emergency brake on its own rules and tells the body, do whatever it takes. What's even weirder, most people don't end up with serious injuries afterward, even though they have just used force that should tear muscles like paper. It's almost as if the body knows precisely how far it can push itself, but chooses not to unless absolutely necessary. And here's the big implication. Maybe your normal strength isn't your real strength. Maybe what you think is your limit is actually your brain's limit, not your body's. In everyday life, the brain is conservative. It rationates strength, protects soft tissue, avoids risk. But hysterical strength hints at a hidden reserve one that only appears when survival demands it. And if you think unlocking impossible strength is shocking, wait until you meet the woman who could outcalculate computers before computers even knew what hit them. You'd think a human brain would at least feel slower than a machine, but then you meet someone who treats gigantic numbers the way most of us treat grocery lists. Enter Shakuntala Devi, often called the human computer, though honestly that nickname sells her short. Computers follow instructions. Devi seemed to dance with numbers. Born in India in 1929, she wasn't trained in advanced mathematics. She didn't study calculus or number theory in university. She didn't even finish formal schooling. But by the time researchers at Imperial College London tested her in the late 1970s, she was doing math in her head faster than the machines designed to replace human calculation. Her most famous demonstration happened in 1980. She was asked to multiply two huge 13-digit numbers, the kind of problem that even modern phones need a moment to process. Devi answered in under 30 seconds, with no notes, no scratch paper, no visible visible mental strain. Imagine asking someone to recite the digits of pi, and they answer before you've finished the question. Scientists were baffled. Dr. Arthur Jensen at UC Berkeley scanned her brain expecting to find some anatomical oddity. Larger lobes, unusual folds, anything. But structurally, her brain looked completely normal. Instead, what stood out was how her brain functioned. When most people do math, their brains activate a predictable network. A bit of language processing, some visual spatial reasoning, and a lot of slow step-by-step working memory. Devi's brain short-circuited that whole routine. Instead of calculating, she appeared to be recognizing numerical patterns the way a musician recognizes chords. To her, numbers weren't abstract symbols, they were geometric, almost alive. She described them as shapes, textures, and relationships. Prime numbers formed certain patterns. Roots had visual symmetries. Massive multiplication problems became landscapes she could mentally walk across. Her mind wasn't running an algorithm. It was seeing the answer. What startled researchers even more was that her methods weren't nonsense. Independent mathematicians later verified her techniques and found them not only valid, but in some cases more elegant than standard textbook approaches. In other words, she discovered shortcuts no one had taught her, shortcuts that formal mathematics eventually acknowledged. And she wasn't a one-in-a-million prodigy locked in her own world. She could teach her approach. Students who learned her pattern-based techniques saw huge jumps in speed and accuracy. That detail hints at something profound. Maybe Devi wasn't born with a mutant math brain. Maybe she just accessed cognitive pathways most of us never learn to use. Modern neuroscience supports this idea. Studies from MIT on intuitive number sense show that humans have a built-in system for perceiving quantities and patterns, one that operates before language and logic. In most people's school drills and step-by-step math overshadow it. But in rare cases like Devi's, that intuitive system blossoms into something astonishing. Her story suggests that mathematical genius might not be about raw intelligence. It might be about seeing numbers differently, less like rules, more like art. And if a human calculator feels mind-bending, the next case might be even stranger. A man who seems to have a built-in compass pointing north, as if evolution forgot to turn that feature off. You'd think humans would rely entirely on GPS these days, but long before satellites, one man navigated the world using nothing but the Earth's magnetic heartbeat. Meet Giuseppe Mercalli, a real-life living compass whose abilities made early 20th century scientists scratch their heads so hard they practically rewrote their research notes. Mercalli wasn't a superhero. He was an Italian geologist born in 1850, soft-spoken, deeply curious, and absolutely convinced that he could feel north. Not guess, not estimate. Literally sense it the way you sense where the sun is on your skin. It started when he was a child. Even in dense fog with zero visibility, he could always find his way home. No landmarks, no maps, nothing. Just an inner pull like a needle aligning to a magnetic field. As he grew older, that sense sharpened into something almost uncanny. He could stand blindfolded, spun in circles surrounded by interfering metal objects, then point directly to magnetic north with less than 2 degrees of error. Scientists of the time tested him with every trick they could think of, and he still nailed it. If you or I tried this, we'd probably point at the nearest coffee shop. But Mercalli's abilities didn't stop at direction. He could feel something else strange trembling in the magnetic environment hours, or even days before earthquakes. Historical accounts suggest he predicted several major quakes, including early warning signs before the catastrophic 1908 Messina earthquake. To modern scientists, that sounds impossible, until you look at what Earth actually does before an earthquake. When fault lines grind and strain beneath the surface rocks under pressure, release electromagnetic waves, tiny signals that sensitive instruments can detect. These signals spike sharply before seismic activity. The idea that a human brain could detect those shifts, that's the part science wasn't ready for. But here's where the story turns from weird to scientifically intriguing. Modern research from universities like Caltech and Manchester suggests that humans might have a faint vestigial version of magnetoreception, the ability to sense magnetic fields. Birds use it for migration. Turtles use it to cross oceans. Even cows strangely tend to face north-south when grazing. And humans, we have tiny magnetite crystals, natural magnetic particles in our inner ears and nasal passages. They're small, dormant, almost useless, unless you're someone like Mercalli. Brain imaging of modern participants with weak magnetosensitivity shows activity in areas responsible for spatial navigation, like the hippocampus. Their brains react to magnetic field changes the same way they react to shifts in physical location. This means Mercalli wasn't a fluke of nature. He may have simply had a more finely tuned version of a biological ability. Humans once relied on a leftover evolutionary feature that most of us never use. Even stranger, his magnetic sense worked everywhere. Chaotic cities full of interference, remote mountains, even underground tunnels. His brain somehow filtered out artificial electromagnetic noise and locked onto Earth's core-generated field the same way noise-cancelling headphones isolate your voice in a crowd. Mercalli challenges a comforting assumption that humans know all our senses. Maybe we don't. Maybe there are hidden modes, faint dusty tools our ancestors used, still buried in our neural circuitry, waiting for someone extraordinary to stumble onto them. And if a built-in compass sounds unbelievable, get ready for the next mystery. A man whose eyes turn fleeting. Chaotic glimpses of a city. Skyscrapers' windows' entire skylines into drawings so accurate they rival architectural blueprints. You'd think human memory would be fuzzy, selective, and full of gaps, until you watch someone glance at a city once and then redraw it with impossible precision. Meet Stephen Wiltshire, often called the human camera, though again, reality is far stranger than the nickname. Stephen doesn't just memorize what he sees. He captures the architecture of reality and reproduces it with such accuracy that urban planners have used his drawings as reference material. Stephen was diagnosed with autism at age 3. For years he barely spoke. But give him a pen and paper, and suddenly the world poured out of him. Buildings, skylines, streets, all drawn with a kind of serene mechanical exactness. While most kids learned to doodle stick figures, Stephen was sketching entire neighborhoods. But his true ability didn't reveal itself until scientists saw what he could do from memory. Here's the test that stunned the world. Stephen took a 20-minute helicopter ride over London. That's it. Just one flyover, no instructions, no note-taking, no pauses. Then he sat down in front of a massive canvas and drew the city perfectly. We're talking hundreds of buildings, window counts, distances, domes, bridges, roof angles, accurate down to the individual brick patterns. Architectural firms later measured his drawings and confirmed that his proportions were correct to an astonishing degree. And it wasn't a one-time fluke. He did the same for New York, Tokyo, Rome, Dubai. To neuroscience, this ability is downright unnerving. Human visual memory doesn't work that way, not even close. We store fragments, not entire landscapes. But Stephen, his brain lights up differently. Researchers like Oliver Sacks and later neuroscientists using MRI scanners found that Stephen's visual cortex was hyperactive and unusually connected to both memory and motor control regions. It's as if the wiring between seeing and remembering was fused into a high-speed circuit, allowing him to transfer complex visual data onto paper without the usual cognitive bottlenecks. Instead of selectively filtering what matters like most brains do to avoid overload, Stephen's mind records everything in his field of view and it records it instantly. Modern studies on autistic perception shed some light on this. Many autistic individuals show heightened sensitivity to detail. They perceive elements of a scene that neurotypical brains automatically ignore, like tiny differences in textures, patterns, or shapes. Combine that with extremely fast visual encoding, and you get a brain that functions less like a casual observer and more like a high-resolution scanner. But here's the twist. Stephen doesn't consciously memorize anything. He barely tries. Researchers noticed that he draws as if the image is unfolding in front of him moment by moment, like he's tracing something only he can see. To him, the memory is simply there, available, whole. This challenges our basic assumptions about memory. Maybe the human brain doesn't lack storage capacity. Maybe it simply chooses efficiency over completeness. Stephen's mind might be showing us what happens when that filter is lifted. His case raises big questions. What does it mean for a memory to be photographic? Is this an ability anyone could train toward? Or is it a rare neurological configuration that gives us a glimpse into a potential all brains share one we simply can't access? And if seeing and remembering in perfect detail seems mind-bending, wait until you hear about the next person whose extraordinary ability wasn't in perception at all, but in healing. You'd think healing would be the one area science has completely mapped out. Cells, tissues, immune responses, the whole biological orchestra. But then you meet someone who seems to conduct that orchestra with nothing but intention. Enter João de Faria, known to many as John of God. Now, to be absolutely clear, in recent years, he was involved in criminal allegations unrelated to the scientific observations we're discussing. Those legal cases are separate from the strictly documented medical studies done decades earlier, when researchers were trying to understand something they witnessed but couldn't explain. Under controlled observation, multiple medical teams watched Faria perform procedures that appeared impossible, identifying internal conditions by touch alone, producing measurable physiological changes in patients, and, most startling of all, influencing biological systems with no conventional intervention. Let's separate myth from data. In the 1990s and early 2000s, doctors from Harvard Medical School and researchers from the Institute of Noetic Sciences studied him closely. Their goal wasn't to declare miracles, it was to document anomalies. And they found plenty. During healing sessions, patients with long-standing conditions, tumors, chronic inflammation, neurological damage showed immediate biological changes. Tumor masses decreased, heart rhythms stabilized, blood chemistry shifted toward healthier ranges. These weren't anecdotes, they were lab-measured outcomes. The strangest part, when Faria entered his healing state, his own brain activity changed dramatically. Electroencephalogram readings detected intense gamma-wave bursts, the same kind seen in advanced Tibetan monks during deep meditation. Gamma waves are associated with integration focus and neural synchronization. But the strengths recorded during Faria's sessions were far beyond typical human baselines. Then came the truly puzzling data. Patients being treated showed changes in their own nervous systems in real time. Heart rate variability improved. Stress hormones dropped. Immune markers rose. It was as if the body reacted to him the same way it reacts to strong placebo responses, except much faster and measurably stronger. Scientists offered hypotheses. Maybe he triggered unusual parasympathetic responses. Maybe it was a hypercharged placebo effect. Maybe his presence modulated patients' nervous systems through subtle cues. But none of these fully match the data. What if some researchers cautiously suggested consciousness can interact with physiology more directly than we assume? This sounds fringe until you look at modern science. At Harvard, studies on meditation show that monks can consciously increase body temperature by 17 degrees. Stanford research shows that focused intention alters immune signaling. Placebo studies demonstrate that belief can produce endorphins stronger than morphine. So perhaps Faria wasn't breaking biology, he was amplifying mechanisms biology already possesses. Even more intriguing, some of his trainees reportedly developed mild versions of the same effects. Their sessions produced measurable, though weaker, physiological changes in subjects. This suggests that whatever mechanism is at play might not be a gift, but a skill involving attention, emotion, and neurobiology. The uncomfortable question becomes, how much can consciousness influence the body? Most of us assume our mind is just a passenger. But cases like this hint at something else, that the mind is also a regulator, a switchboard operator in control of processes we normally consider automatic and untouchable. And if healing with intention seems hard to believe, the next case takes us somewhere equally mysterious, into the mind of a man who can barely perform daily tasks, but can learn dozens of languages with supernatural ease. You'd think mastering even one new language takes discipline, flashcards, and years of practice. Now imagine someone who learns languages the way most of us learn song lyrics, effortlessly, rapidly, and with uncanny precision. Meet Christopher. On paper, Christopher shouldn't be a linguistic genius. He has severe learning disabilities. His IQ is around 67. He struggles with basic arithmetic. He needs help with daily tasks like handling money or navigating unfamiliar places. And yet, he speaks, reads, and writes more than 20 languages. Some he absorbed in months, others in mere weeks. His case stunned researchers at University College London. When they first tested him, they assumed he had memorized phrases or practiced scripts. But no, Christopher understood the structure of languages. The grammar, the logic, the patterns, the rhythm. He could flip between Finnish and Greek and Italian and Hindi, the way you or I flip TV channels. But the most jaw-dropping test was this: scientists handed him Epin, a completely artificial language designed for linguistic experiments. Think Klingon but harder. Within 2 weeks, he was translating complex sentences and generating entirely new ones flawlessly. How is this possible? Brain imaging offers clues. Christopher's language processing regions, areas like Broca's and Wernicke's, were not just active. They were supercharged, enlarged, hyperconnected. It's as though the wiring for language in his brain was overdeveloped, like a violinist with oversized hands built for difficult chords. And the wildest part, his language ability exists independently of his general intelligence. Neuroscience has long assumed language relies heavily on reasoning, working memory, and abstract thought. Christopher's brain breaks that rule. It's operating in modular mode, the linguistic part running at full genius, the rest functioning at a much lower level. This lines up with one of linguist Noam Chomsky's most famous theories, that humans are born with an innate, hardwired language engine, a universal grammar built into our brains. For most of us, that system operates quietly in the background. For Christopher, it seems to be running at maximum capacity, free from the usual cognitive filters that shape how we learn. His abilities go beyond spoken language too. He learned sign languages with the same speed and accuracy, showing his brain wasn't relying on sound, it was relying on structure. Give him grammar and he'll give you fluency. This reveals a fascinating truth about the human mind. Intelligence isn't a single score or ability. It's a collection of specialized systems, each with its own potential. And sometimes those systems light up in extraordinary, uneven, mysterious ways. Christopher's gift challenges the belief that language is just another form of general intelligence. Instead, it seems to be an instinct, one that can operate extraordinarily even when everything else doesn't. And if you think controlling language is impressive, wait until you meet a man who can control something far more primal: his body temperature. You'd think body temperature is one of those things you can't control, like your heartbeat or your digestion, until you meet a man who treats the cold like it's a mild inconvenience. Enter Wim Hof, known worldwide as the Iceman. You've probably seen the headlines. He climbed part of Mount Everest wearing only shorts. He ran a marathon in the Arctic Circle, shirtless, in temperatures that would hospitalize most people in minutes. He submerged himself in ice water for nearly 2 hours, and his core body temperature barely moved. Scientists assumed his feats were exaggerations until they started studying him in controlled labs. That's when everything got strange. Researchers at Wayne State University, Radboud University, and several medical labs across Europe monitored Hoff during cold exposure and found that his physiology rewrote the rulebook. Normally, when you get cold, your body panics, blood vessels constrict muscles, shiver metabolism spikes randomly. It's messy, involuntary, defensive. But Hoff's body behaved like a perfectly tuned machine. His metabolic rate didn't spike from shivering, it increased from deep internal heat production. His blood chemistry shifted in protective ways. His immune system activated instead of collapsing. And most astonishing of all, he controlled these responses consciously. Think about that. He was choosing to influence systems that science has long labeled automatic. In MRI scans, Hoff could activate areas of his brain linked to pain suppression and temperature control at will. When exposed to extreme cold, his brain lit up in patterns unlike anything researchers had seen. It wasn't survival panic. It was deliberate regulation like adjusting a thermostat. Even more shocking, Hoff claimed he could teach this ability. And he did. Researchers injected volunteers trained in his breathing method with a bacterial toxin, something that normally causes fever, chills, and nausea. The trained group showed dramatically reduced symptoms. Their bodies cleared the toxin faster. Their immune responses were stronger, yet more controlled. In the scientific world, this was a mic drop moment. It proved something once considered impossible. Humans can consciously influence their autonomic nervous system, the system that supposedly runs on autopilot. The Wim Hof method isn't magic. It's a mix of deep breathing, cold exposure, and focused meditation. But the effects are profound. His techniques activate brown adipose tissue, a type of fat that burns energy to create heat and stimulate adrenaline release in a controlled, non-destructive way. Essentially, Hoff hacked ancient survival pathways buried in our physiology. What his case suggests is breathtaking. Maybe we aren't as locked into our biology as we think. Maybe the wall between mind and body is more like a thin curtain. Maybe extreme resilience is a dormant skill, not a genetic lottery ticket. And now we've arrived at the final mystery, not a single person, but a bigger truth these cases collectively reveal about all of us. You'd think mysteries like these belong in comic books, but every one of them was measured, scanned, documented, or verified by scientists who expected normal results and found the opposite. So what do all these people? The lightning savant, the human sonar, the woman who remembers everything, the mother who lifted a car, the human calculator, the living compass, the photographic artist, the healer, the language machine, and the Iceman actually tell us. Let's pull the curtain back. We've seen a man struck by lightning who suddenly sees math as colors and shapes bypassing everything we think neurons can do. We met someone who navigates the world with clicks, literally turning sound into vision, proving the brain doesn't follow one path. It rewrites maps whenever it needs to. We met a woman whose past never fades, whose memories play back with perfect clarity, defying the idea that the brain must forget to function. We saw ordinary people unlock strength they should not possess, hinting that our muscles hide a reserve tank our own brains refuse to access. We met a language savant who disproves the idea that intelligence is one single thing, and shows language might be woven deeper into our DNA than we ever realized. We watched a man regulate his temperature through sheer will, blurring the line between conscious and unconscious physiology. Individually, each story is astonishing. Collectively, they whisper a much larger truth. The limits we believe we have. The hard edges of memory, strength, perception, intelligence, and healing may not be limits at all. They might just be settings. Science can measure these abilities. It can confirm the brain activity, the immune changes, the mathematical outputs, the navigational accuracy. But it still can't fully explain how they happen or why these abilities only appear in rare extreme circumstances. Maybe the human brain evolved with far more potential than we routinely access. Maybe trauma training or unusual development unlocks systems most of us never tap into. Maybe what we call superhuman is simply human in its raw, unfiltered form. The beauty of science isn't that it has all the answers. It's that it keeps revealing bigger questions. Questions about who we are, what we're capable of, and how much of our own mind remains unexplored territory. So here's the question for you. Which of these mysteries blew your mind the most? The lightning mathematician, the human sonar, the memory time machine, or the man who walks through ice like it's summer? And if you love exploring how wonderfully strange reality can be, how science, nature, and the human brain constantly surprise us, subscribe and stay curious. Because the more we learn, the more impossible things start looking possible.